A very Zoe Kostantopoulos, former Speaker of the Greek Parliament, who was elected as Syriza MP, and one of those who defended the no referendum, but then subsequently left Syriza and now heads her own party, Coast Freedom Party. She, many of you probably are aware, she founded the Debt Audit Commission, which showed that the Greek debt is illegal. And Zoe will share her thoughts on how do we challenge the forces of capital and austerity which blight the lives of not only people in this country, but of course have brought the people of Greece to their knees.
Good evening to all. It's a real pleasure to be here. I would like to wholeheartedly thank the organizers. It's an honor and a privilege to be in this panel with Asad, Shareefa, Gary, Naomi, Diane, Jeremy, maybe later. It's also an honor and a pleasure to talk to this audience of determined people, because it is determined people who can change the world. It is determined people who have changed the world along the centuries, and it is our duty to do what the title of this festival is, The World Transformed. Not just transform the world, but really change it. It's a very serious project, and it's our own project. I will speak to you about my country, Greece. I will speak to you about my people, the Greek people. And in doing this, I'm speaking to you about your country, your countries, about you. Because what has happened and is still happening in Greece is only a preview of what will happen here and elsewhere if we don't stop it. Ever since 2010, the Greek people are being crucified. They're being sacrificed. Don't listen to those who say they are making sacrifices. No, they are being sacrificed. They're being sacrificed by a system of ruthless representatives of banks, of trusts, of economic and corrupt political interests who just believe that the people don't matter. In 2010, this system decided that the people should pay for the debt that was created by corrupt governments, the Greek government, other European governments, the debt that was closely linked to corrupt deals involving gifts to government officials in order to give public money to international and foreign firms, especially German, French, and American. In 2010, the Greek people were told the country was over-indebted and that they had to make sacrifices in order to repay this debt they never heard of before. And then what was called a bailout deal was concluded, a bailout deal, which was really a death sentence for the Greek society. The EU, the IMF, and the Greek government concluded a memorandum which provided that the people should die in order for the banks to survive. It provided for cuts in salaries and pensions and the total liquidation of the public property. It provided for measures which caused what they were destined to cause. That's misery, poverty, deaths, an explosion of suicides, children fainting at school, having no food, children going to school without heating, without teachers, without books, cancer patients not having access to their medicine, hospitals operating with one nurse for every 40 patients, people living a precariousness never experienced before, and the youth experiencing unemployment and exclusion like never before, and being forced to migrate in hundreds of thousands out of this total impasse and this total inability to find a job and be happy in their own country. This memorandum regime was imposed upon the people without them ever consenting and without them ever being asked. The parliament started implementing dictates by the creditors, the European Union and the IMF, in extraordinary procedures, ultra urgent procedures, without deliberation, without even the people knowing what was passed in Parliament. And then in 2015, the people elected to government a political force which had undertaken and committed itself to do away with those policies. It had undertaken to do away with austerity, with the liquidation of the public property, to do away with the memoranda, and to defend gaining back democracy and popular sovereignty. That was in January 2015. The creditors continued to push in order for austerity to continue. And then in July 2015, at a moment where the creditors were advancing a 48-hour ultimatum, saying you either accept more austerity, you either accept more poverty, you either accept that more people die, or we're gonna finish with your country, the people were asked to decide. There was a referendum in the country after 40 years of democracy, after 40 years after the dictatorship. This was the first referendum held in the country, and I'm very proud to have presided the session of the parliament which decided to hold this referendum. And when the referendum was decided, the creditors addressed the people with even more extortionate threats. They said clearly, and this was the representatives of the EU, of the IMF, they said clearly to the people, vote yes, because if you vote no, you will die. If you vote no, you will have no medicine. If you vote no, you will not have anything to eat. We will cut everything. This was public statements. The banks were closed and liquidity was shut, according, pursuant to the ECB's, the European Central Bank's refusal to give liquidity. And guess what? With all the media in the country saying that yes would prevail, with all the propaganda agents saying that yes is the only way, with all the representatives of the old regime saying yes, yes, vote yes, this is the European way, well, the people voted no. They voted no. Thank you for this. This is really important for the Greek people, because they were very courageous and they continue to be very courageous, and they continue to prove that the people are more courageous than their leaders when the leaders prefer power over the people. What happened afterwards was the most shocking thing. A coup happened, a real act of war, because even though there was a clear popular mandate for no, the creditors insisted that yes be enforced upon the people. And the most shocking thing was that the government and the Prime Minister accepted this. The most shocking thing was that the government and the Prime Minister who had incarnated the defense of the people, who had incarnated the hope and defending people's rights and people's lives and people's dignity, was the one who accepted to turn no into yes and to implement the most neoliberal, anti-social, anti-democratic program ever implemented in the country, but I think in the whole European Union during the last decades. So what happened in Greece was a coup, yes. This coup was initiated by the creditors, yes, but they couldn't have done it alone. They couldn't have done it without the insiders. They couldn't have done it without the collaborators. They couldn't have done it without the traitors. And this is very important to know, because there is some of those who want us to think that the government had no alternative. And this is actually the new Tina, like this shocking attack on the people emanating from the ones who had been defending the people was what I call, Naomi, an elevated doctrine of shock, because the attacks and the blows are culminated and elevated, and now they don't come from the known enemy, but they come from the one you thought was your ally and your defender. What has been happening ever since in Greece is the implementation of more cuts, more austerity. I'm the former president of the parliament, by the way, because I refused to vote on these measures. I refused to legitimize this imposition. I voted no on every single vote, and then the parliament had to be dissolved in order to find a better majority to implement the measures. And I'm very glad to be the former president, because I know which side I'm on, and I'm on the side of the people. This is something anyone involved in politics should remember and should choose very clearly, the side they're on. What has been happening the last 2 years? More cuts in pensions, the 13th cut in pensions, cuts in salaries, total liquidation of ports. I'm talking about liquidation because that's the terminology used. Ports, airports, seashores, archaeological places, cultural places, everything is being liquidated, it's being sold for peanuts. Corruption is reaching sky-high limits. The government is very happy to conclude deals with the Israel state. It's very happy to and really abandon the Palestinian people. It's very happy to conclude deals with Turkey that totally violate the refugee rights and international humanitarian law. It is building a new corrupt system with new oligarchs of their own preference. It's controlling the media, and it's covering up what it's doing, including letting the environment be totally polluted and surrendered. We're having in Athens the biggest and most horrendous ecological environmental catastrophe the last 2 weeks. A tanker sank near Athens, and the whole sea around Athens is being polluted, and nobody knows about it because this is the cover-up of the EU and the Greek government. Coming to alternatives and coming to this false and very provocative narrative that there is no alternative and that the government, the Greek government, could do nothing else but surrender. I'm saying alternatives are always there. Alternatives are not contracts, they're not warranties that you get. Alternatives are the fruit of the struggle of people who defend principles, defend democracy, defend freedom, defend justice, defend human rights, defend the people. What are we left to do? How do we claim alternatives? Well, another lesson learned from Greece is that the big majority that voted no was left defenseless by the government who was supposed to represent it. This big majority still exists, but it needs to defend itself, it needs to resist, and it needs to defend the no that was cast in the referendum. Resistance is disobedience. What the people are called upon to do in defending themselves is refuse to obey to every measure and every legal disposition and every provision asking them to surrender their rights, to surrender their country, to surrender their homes. They're liquidating people's homes also through electronic seizures that were passed a few months ago in Parliament. This is part of the new TINA. People need to stand up for their rights and claim that their mandate be respected, claim that their lives and future be respected, and defend democracy, liberty, and justice, ask for the truth, speak the truth, demand accountability for the crime being perpetrated against them, and settle for nothing less than what they deserve as equal and dignified people. What is happening in my country is a crime. I ask you to speak about it. I ask you to spread the word about the real story, about the real facts. I ask you to defend, together with my people, democracy, liberty, and freedom. I ask you to settle for nothing less. And I would like to share with you my optimism that at the end, it is the people who will prevail. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe, for that very, very powerful contribution. And of course, many lessons for us and for us here in the UK, maybe for the coming years.
freedomtv.gr